Welcome to Ordinary Teachers and Students, where we get to hear teachers and students tell us their extraordinary stories. My hope is that through this podcast, ordinary teachers from around the world can relate to the stories they hear and get some timely suggestions and ideas. My name is Alan Cheng, and I'm a life coach as well as a university lecturer. My vision is to make life coaching a part of every school. Hello, today I'm delighted to invite Teresa Fung onto our podcast. She's a senior English teacher and curriculum developer at a tutorial school in Hong Kong. I actually met Teresa in my first job in Hong Kong when I was an audit associate. Given our similar backgrounds of growing up in the UK, we both realized that we both enjoyed teaching much more than crunching numbers. Let's learn more about Teresa's journey into teaching. So welcome, Teresa.
Hi there, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Anything to add to that intro?
No, I think that sums it up quite well.
I guess we can tell quickly from your accent which part of the UK you're from. Do you want to tell us a little bit more where you grew up?
I think, yeah, it's kind of complicated. I was born in Ireland and but grew up in Northern Ireland. So whenever people ask me like, oh, you grew up in Ireland, do you speak Irish? You know, that's usually like the second question. And I'm like, oh, sorry, you know, I don't. Big disappointment to them.
And the conversation ends there, right?
Well, it doesn't end there, but it just dampens the excitement a little. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as I kind of mentioned already in the intro, you were originally working in the audit accounting industry. Do you want to touch a little bit on that first? Maybe like why you chose that? Yeah.
Well, my degree is in accountancy and finance, so naturally, it seemed right to just go into that field. I think, just as like a fresh graduate and mostly, I think you just kind of like want to try out your field. I think before you being in business, you want to like, be in like the business world and kind of like have a taste of it. But I think maybe ironically, it was my last year of my accountancy and finance degree that I felt I'm not too sure whether I actually want to.
Interesting. Okay. So you
Go
already kind of
into
felt
it.
a sense of not sure whether you wanted, but you still went into it, right?
Yeah, I still went into it. I actually wanted to go into more finance,
Right.
but because my major was accountancy, so naturally a lot of companies, whenever they're hiring fresh graduates, they want you to major in the field. So I thought like, oh, okay, maybe I can get into finance maybe later, start with like accounting and auditing first. So our first job together, or well, our job together, whenever we were working, that was my first full-time, long-term full-time job. Yeah, in Hong Kong. So
I actually want to take you
yeah.
back even further. I'm just curious to know why you chose accounting and finance in the first place. So the reason I ask is obviously because as teachers, sometimes we're trying to guide students to think about their futures, right? And so what I heard from you was that almost your decision to specialize in accounting rather than finance kind of almost led you to decide your job or your first job, right? So I'm just curious to kind of take it even further back. Why accounting and finance?
Well, I think it's given like our Chinese background, because I think my parents, being of like the older generation, any kind of like profession, so if like, into medicine, accountancy, law, those are seen as prestigious like professions. So like my dad thought like, oh, well, like, you're doing well in accounts in like secondary school, like why not take that? And to me at the time as well, I thought like, well, why not? Because I think naturally, I think a lot of students that we teach, would say that, well, they don't really know what they want to do. Well, I'm really good at that.
Mm,
Maybe I'll just do that. And I think I fell
yeah.
into that category.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure,
Um,
sure, sure.
so yeah.
Okay, okay, got it. And so if again, fast forward now to towards the end of your own like auditing journey, what happened there? Like, so why did you decide to I remember you done all the exams for accounting?
I still had a couple to go. So
Okay,
I
okay.
think that was one of the reasons why I stayed so
Mm,
long actually, because I
mm.
felt that my degree also exempted me from at least half of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
accountancy papers that I needed to do. So I only had a couple to go, and I was struggling at the time, thinking like, whether I should quit or whether I should actually,
Mm,
hold it out and just, finish like these accountancy papers and then
mm,
wait then to see what happens. But a friend actually said he actually used an analogy of a gym membership,
mm,
which is quite funny. So he said that uh, if you were given a gym membership, like a lifetime one for like another subscription fee, and
mm,
would you actually go for it? And at the time, I thought like, oh, that's interesting because yeah, if I don't actually see myself going to the gym
mm,
often, or like uh, go continuing into like accountancy and finance
mm,
or like in the auditing field, like why am I using this time? Why am I spending this time and this effort and also like the money to be
mm,
taking like these
mm.
examinations?
Yeah, sure, sure.
So that's when I kind of like decided like yes. And at the time, of course, I was still relatively young, and
Mm, mm, mm.
so
You
I
still
thought
are
like,
right
okay,
now.
well, no, not really, no, not exactly, but yeah. So that's when I decided that yeah, let's
Mm,
just quit. And my colleagues at the time said that okay, well, if you don't know what you want to do right now, but if you still want to stay in Asia, study Mandarin or
mm,
study
mm,
Chinese.
mm, mm,
And
mm,
so
mm,
that's what
mm,
I did. I went off to Beijing to study
mm,
Mandarin
mm,
for almost a year. And afterwards I was thinking like, okay, what now? What should I do?
mm, mm.
Um, yeah. So, and it was actually by chance.
Sorry, do you mind if I just stop you there? Did you not think about that before going to Beijing? As in,
No,
like,
because I thought more or less that I don't know, things would fall into place in a way.
okay,
Because I thought
okay,
like,
yeah,
yeah, because I thought like, okay, like having Chinese on my resume would
mm,
kind of like open more doors.
sure,
But yeah, of course, at the time I didn't know what really. Yeah, so by chance, just stumbled upon an ad looking for
mm,
a part-time IELTS tutor
ah,
for the
right,
reading and writing.
mm,
And at the time, I was thinking like, okay, well, I don't actually know what this IELTS is.
mm, 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 mm,
Um, yeah, so but I thought like, oh, well, why not just kind of like go for it? Um it's part-time and it pays hourly,
mm,
so meaning that, there's not a lot of a commitment. So at the
mm,
time for me, I was thinking that, well, it's not that I'm tied for life or anything.
mm, 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 mm,
Yeah. So but actually funny enough, teaching the first lesson I had. So it was a group of 5 students, a
mm,
very small group. And after the first lesson, I actually had a lot of satisfaction
mm,
from
mm.
that lesson, and much more than the 2 years in accounting and auditing that I had.
I resonate so
Uh,
much with that.
yeah, so I just fell in love with it, I guess.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I think before we afterwards I actually asked you, what should I do
yeah.
if I want to actually improve and try to teach better. And I think that's when you recommended like the CertiSol course.
Yeah, so that was a very long intro, but I think it's necessary because like it's been quite a journey for you to go from what you originally thought you were going to do to what you're doing today. What's made you stay in this industry though? Like, or maybe another question, you can think of which one you want to answer, like have you considered leaving or like kind of going back to accounting and finance and all that?
Um, I don't think I'll go back into accountancy and finance. Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the day-to-day or yeah, day-to-day satisfaction.
Mm,
And also like whenever, because now whenever I first started out, it was very much just test prep. And
mm,
then I went to ESL, went into ESL teaching
mm,
in like larger groups. Um, and now it's mostly like one-to-one, like tutoring.
mm,
I
mm,
think
mm.
the fulfillment that I get from seeing students being able to improve
Yeah.
from whenever they first started like having lessons with me until like they, reach a particular milestone or a goal. So
Mm,
usually
mm,
students that come to me have like a particular focus. They want
mm,
to go to a boarding school, a UK boarding school, or to pass particular examinations. So you could say that, I think my teaching, I guess like the industry, like tutoring industry, is
mm,
quite goal oriented.
mm,
So
mm,
in a way, it's good for
mm,
the likes of myself because I feel that, with the goal or a purpose kind of like in mind,
mm,
for both myself and like the students to strive towards, it's
mm,
something I find that, whenever we were able to achieve that goal, it's
mm,
actually very fulfilling.
mm, mm. Sure, sure. Thanks for that. Great. So with all episodes, I kind of go into deep dive into a particular area of education or teaching that you want to talk about. Was there any topic that you wanted to discuss or just talk about
Um,
a bit more?
well, for me, I find it really interesting to like this concept of activating like a student schema.
Mm, mm,
So um before with like tutoring, it's been as I said, like you're very like goal oriented.
yep.
But I find that whenever students are able to kind of like absorb or try to like understand kind of concepts with concepts or
Mm,
like knowledge that they know of before,
mm,
that it
mm, mm,
connects to them, I think the results are like they're much more, I guess, like I don't know how to put it. It's like it just comes like more like much quicker,
mm,
and also like they get more out of it as
mm,
well.
mm,
Like they're
mm,
able
mm.
to actually develop um
Yep.
and greater like content, like whether it be content or like vocabulary or like we're able to like touch upon themes and have like a
Mm.
greater discussion.
Yeah, sure. It's fascinating because I recorded an episode. So I don't know if you've noticed. So what I'm doing is I interview teachers, I interview students, but I also do like individual episodes, very short ones, like bite-sized ones. And I did one quite recently. I don't think it's live yet, but it's about long-term memory. And the one thing I kind of mentioned is that I'm not just doing a plug for my episode in the future, but I just want to kind of take that information into this episode is that for long-term memory to happen, so for people to learn something properly, it's important to connect it to previous learning. So that's almost like a critical stage of learning where you you see something new and you try to think, okay, what do I know that's kind of similar to this, right? And so I think that's what activating the schema is all about. So I'm curious, like, how do you normally activate that schema? Do you have any few things that you do this effectively?
Well, I think like, if we kind of like think back to our kind of like the TESOL
Mm,
days, kind of like, trying to get students to learn new vocabulary, it's really like, setting it in context.
mm, mm, mm,
So like here, usually, if we're looking at introducing kind of like a new topic or a new text,
mm,
usually I try as much as possible to kind of like discuss around maybe like the themes of like the text.
mm,
Um, yeah. So if say, for example, like yeah, so recently or before, I had a GCSE student
mm,
studying like Romeo and Juliet.
mm,
So to them, like any texts that are Shakespeare texts,
Mm,
it's usually quite dry or dull, or like they
mm.
find that it's like, oh, this is like, English that doesn't, seem anything relevant to like the, modern day.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
does this relate to me?
Mm,
And for me, we were looking at a part of like the nurse and
mm,
Juliet. And I kind of like try to get the students to see that how actually domestic helpers in Hong Kong are sometimes quite similar to like
mm.
the nurse and
Yeah, yeah.
Juliet, like their relationship.
Mm,
There
mm,
is that
mm.
loyalty there, because
Yep.
like the fact that like Juliet's like nurse kind of like
Mm,
serves her family.
mm,
And usually like as with like the text, Juliet seems to have like, I guess a better relationship with like the
mm, mm,
nurse than her
mm,
actual
mm.
mother, because of
Yep.
the fact that she doesn't see her mother often,
Mm,
or there's
mm,
that distance. So similarly, I feel like,
mm, mm,
this is similar to like in some Hong Kong families
mm.
where like the children usually actually maybe see their domestic helpers more so
So
than
true.
their parents.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
like I try to like, make those connections, because like the more that students are able to connect with like text to themselves or with others that they know of,
Mm.
like I think the better like the analysis, the better that they're able to like delve deeper into
Yeah,
the
sure, sure,
text.
sure, sure. Great. I think that's a really good example. And I was just curious, like, obviously it's great when you can make that connection, right? So it seems like you did really well for the Romeo and Juliet one. I thought you were gonna just play like Taylor Swift song and or something along that line. Anyway, I was just gonna ask you, like, obviously it's okay when it works, but then what happens when sometimes you find it really tough to make a connection between what you're trying to teach and the students' lives, or if you try something and they're like, no, I don't know anything about it. Have you had that experience before?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. So yeah, you're trying to make like the connections, but nothing seems to fit. Yeah, in those cases, I do find myself like maybe just kind of like taking a moment,
Mm.
to yeah, take which involves taking a deep breath to see like
So,
to kind of
processing that your lesson plan has just fallen apart,
yes,
right?
yes. Um, yeah, so usually what I do is that we then try to actually go into the text. I actually then, I'll not try that, where
Mm,
to establish any connections beforehand.
mm,
Perhaps like, we'll just start reading the text and
mm,
try to just understand it for what it is.
mm,
And
mm.
then afterwards, hopefully, once the literal understanding comes
Yeah,
through,
yeah,
then maybe that there could be some deeper discussion into
mm,
like the topic. Like, oh, what
yeah,
do you think about that? If you were the character themselves,
mm,
have you find yourself in similar situations? So I find that then that would have to like it's just like a different way, I guess, in
yeah,
terms of like trying to make connections
yeah,
rather
yeah.
than forgoing it, I guess.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because sometimes really students might not have any schema for you to activate. So therefore, just
Mhm.
throwing them into it and seeing what connections they make once they understand it, I think that's quite useful too. Yeah, I mean, are there any other things that you feel activating a schema helps with? I mean, obviously, one obvious one is vocabulary. Another one is like the topic in general. Are there any other things that you feel activating student schema helps with?
I think generally because of like the GCSE syllabus and
Mm,
like the IB syllabus requires students to, think deeper
mm,
into like the themes and to kind of like make those connections. Because at the end of the day, because most I find that like I guess with my test prep days before, whenever I first started
mm,
teaching tutoring, I studied a lot in terms of mark schemes, and
mm,
like the glaring thing or like words that actually come up is that of like your perception.
Mm,
students having a perception
mm,
into like here what they're reading in terms of like their text. So
mm,
be it
mm,
like, yeah, in their reading or
mm,
be it like writing, like they
mm,
show a perceptive insight into
mm,
what it is that they're studying. So I find that, in order for the students or for me to like facilitate them to get to that point, because that's usually like here the higher end of like the mark
mm,
schemes,
mm,
is for them to make those connections.
mm.
So that's why I said I've kind of like tried to do that early on,
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
trying to like connect them to the themes. And the
Mm,
more that
mm,
they're able to do so, the more that they'll be able to say
mm,
on the
mm, mm,
topic
mm.
or give like their opinion on it.
Sure, sure, sure. I was just thinking while you're talking just now, because one difficulty of activating the schema is just that it really depends on the student's past experience, right? And so sometimes maybe it's kind of easier for us in schools where we have our class, where we have such a variety of experiences, so we can always almost guarantee that, okay, whatever we say, someone will make a connection to that, and then maybe we
Mhm.
can invite
Yeah.
them to explain a bit more. It must be quite difficult, isn't it? Like when you do one-to-one work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you do feel like you're hitting a brick wall, um,
Mm,
because
mm,
students, like, especially if it is one to one, if there's nothing to bounce back
mm,
and, to give you that kind of like feedback, I find that before, whenever I was first kind of like in my first teaching days, I felt that it was just me kind of like delivering
mm, mm,
like the
mm, mm, mm,
content or
mm,
whatever. But I think the more that I've like taught, the more that I find that it really depends on like what the students give you back as well,
mm,
and for you to
mm,
modify the lessons as you go along. Sometimes I find that lesson plans, as good as they are, in order to like have a framework,
mm,
but it usually does depend on like your how the students kind of
yeah.
like take to it,
Mm, mm.
yeah, and
It seems like
modify
you
it.
like you need to really know the student quite well, to plan the lesson well for them. So how do you do that? Like, I mean, you have quite limited time with them.
Mhm.
Do you generally see students like once a week or once a few every
Yeah,
few days?
yeah. So once a week is like the um generally that is
Yeah,
like most for most students. There are some students that would be more frequent
yeah.
because like here their milestones are um that much closer.
Mm,
So they would take more lessons. But generally for students who are, you only see them once a week, it is sometimes quite difficult to see like
mm,
here a marked progress, maybe
mm,
within like 3 to 4 lessons. So like at times, students themselves as well as like parents, so there is like the pressure, like whenever students have had like a month's worth of lessons, and
mm,
then parents would be coming to you and saying
mm,
like, well, why is my you know
mm,
my child not made significant
mm,
progress?
mm, mm.
Yeah, and honestly I think that really it does take time, especially whenever I only do see them once a week and for
Uh,
like an hour.
And I guess you see quite a lot of different students as well, right? So is it quite difficult for you to remember different people's interests and what they like and all their background and all that?
It's not too difficult, given the fact that we do keep a log of
Ah,
each
okay.
lesson.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
so of each lesson in terms of what's been covered,
Mm, mm,
I do try to, as much as possible, to kind of like note down, okay, what has been covered and what are
mm,
some of like the strengths and areas for
mm,
improvement for the
mm, mm,
student.
mm.
So like, the next lesson comes, we're able to kind of like pick up from that.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of build a profile of them, so it helps you
Yeah,
to teach them better, I guess. Great.
yeah.
Is there anything about activating the schema that we haven't covered that you still want to talk about?
Mm, I think generally, I think that's it. Probably, like what do you think about like, curriculum based on kind of themes? So I think like
Mm,
with activating schema, I think that has, I don't know, just from like reading, like
mm,
research, it is something that is out there. There are some like, teachers have implemented kind of like a thematic based like curriculum
Yeah, I would say
where
so,
you're kind
definitely. So with themes, like when you have a clear theme and you plan units based on themes, I think it's much easier to have that connection with students because, like, obviously, when you plan the theme, uh, I'm guessing that you have the choice of the theme, and when you have the choice of the theme, then when you can choose themes that you feel teenagers or children you're teaching can relate to, I think it's much easier. So I would probably start backwards, as in think about, okay, what kind of themes would students like, and then to plan the theme based on that. And so, yeah, I think that's a quite interesting topic. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, because for me, I'm thinking again, in terms of covering content, because like I feel like with themes,
Mm,
things that like, as you said, relate to students or like, just kind of like themes that we as human beings kind of like know of, like that of
mm.
like here, um, maybe like love,
Yeah,
relationships,
yeah.
or like, ambition and so forth. I
Mm,
think these are kind of like global themes that, students should be able to kind of like know and kind of connect to.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of you have the theme, and then underneath that will be different topics that you can cover with
Yeah,
students, I
that
guess,
kind
right?
of covers and yeah, and like
Mm,
texts that are kind of like,
mm, mm,
connected to that theme. So like they're also exposed to a wider range of texts as well,
mm.
looking at different perspectives on the same theme.
Yeah, sure. Right. I just wanted to kind of end that part by just telling our audience how excited Teresa gets when she talks about curriculum. So you might notice from her title that she's also a curriculum developer. And so when she tells me some ideas, I can just feel the excitement, even if it's just a text message. Anyway, are you ready to move on to the quick fire questions?
Sure.
So
Yep,
for this, it
sure.
will just be short, concise answers. So how would your students describe you?
Mm, nice, helpful.
hmm Okay. How about any favorite go-to activities in your classroom?
Mm, don't think there's really a set one, but generally for introductions, I like two truths and one lie.
Oh yes. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, two truths and one lie. Yeah, good. How about online tools? Are there any that you use, like online resource or tools?
Um, Google. That, no, in all seriousness, I think it really depends on like here the batch or the cohort of students that I have.
Mm,
So
mm.
for younger students, I find Twinkle to be quite good.
Oh, I haven't heard of
Um,
that. What's Twinkle for? Is it like vocabulary
um,
things? No.
no, it's actually a range of like it goes from I think KS2, so like Key Stage 2 up to
Mm,
Key Stage 5, up to A levels. So
mm.
I use it a lot for descriptive writing
Okay.
resources and also kind of like some like short excerpts, stories to kind of like engage younger
Mm.
learners. Yeah.
Sure. Oh,
Um,
I'll give that a little bit of exploration afterwards, and I'll add a
yeah.
link to the show notes. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
How about something teachers can do for their own well-being? So obviously the tutoring industry is a pretty stressful. I mean, you guys work very different hours from a regular teacher in a school. So what do you think teachers can do for their own well-being?
I think it's to set boundaries.
Mm,
Yeah. So don't feel the need to bring work home,
mm,
or kind of like, to be marking or replying to emails,
mm,
out of your work hours. I think that's really important.
mm.
Yeah, kind of like taking my own advice actually, because I used to do that a lot,
Mm,
where it just felt that work just kind of like seeped into private life and family
yeah,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I feel that as teachers or yeah, who want to do well in like the teaching profession, it's kind of like feel the need to bring work home because like that's seen as like you're a good teacher. But I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
now the more that I teach, I find that, yeah, it doesn't mean that I have to do that in order to be
Yeah,
defined
yeah,
as a
yeah,
good
yeah,
teacher.
yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And do you have any funny or strange, scary, touching moments that happened in your classroom?
Um, I think a scary experience, well, teaching experience
Oh,
that happened to me
love
early
scary ones.
in
Yeah.
the well, more nerve-wracking for me than like actual
Mm-hmm.
scary horror.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it was in my kind of like early teaching days. So I was teaching in Shenzhen at the time, and I had a face-to-face lesson, which was a lesson that comprised of like about four students,
Mm,
and they were. I remember looking at idioms, and it
mm,
was not very intermediate class, and the center manager was sitting there observing me. Um, and throughout the whole face-to-face lesson, um, the center manager afterwards said that, yeah, like you didn't seem to have much of a presence in the lesson. To
mm,
me, I thought like, oh, I actually thought I was like, increasing the student like talking time.
mm, 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 mm,
But I kind of understood and got his point, because it didn't feel like I was like kind of like leading the lesson as a
mm, mm.
teacher. So afterwards, I reflected on the lesson, and then like in the next lesson in which that my center manager observed, which was like a workshop, a bigger class, I kind of like moved around more in the classroom.
Mm,
I also got
mm,
students to
mm.
move around as well. Like I think, I don't know, maybe also I knew that my center manager liked seeing like kind of like, teachers and I guess like students kind of like having more energy in like
Yeah,
the room.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah. So afterwards, it was like, oh phew, he's not gonna fire me.
Yeah. But I was thinking, it seemed like kind of almost a light bulb moment for you, right? In terms of, oh, wait, there's another way of teaching, right? So teaching maybe needs to move around more, bit more energy in the classroom. So it seems like the reason you brought this up is because it's quite a big moment for you in your own teaching career.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Do you have
yep,
a question for me?
definitely.
So you've already broken the rule of asking questions already, but I'll allow you another chance to ask another question about anything at all. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, like I think recently or just like, post-COVID,
Mm,
there has been students who've, really fallen behind
mm,
worse than like their grade level.
mm, mm,
What do
mm,
you think, like as a teacher or as an
mm,
educator,
mm.
that, we should do, or what could be changed?
Mm, 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 mm. Actually, the simple answer is tutoring. So I'm not just promoting your business, but I actually feel it is tutoring. So like one-to-one, small group tutoring, because right now, actually, I don't think I've told you this or anyone or many people. I'm doing some volunteer tutoring for like underprivileged children, and so just reading the report of the company who kind of arrange it, it's quite amazing the impact that tutoring can have on underprivileged children. And as you said, right, post-COVID, if we put the two things together, COVID plus underprivileged, right, it means that some students are really, really far
Mm,
behind. And so the way
yeah.
they work is that actually I just tutor two students. So they kind of get as many volunteers around the UK as possible. And I just am responsible too. And when you have such a small group, you're much more able to understand what they're good at. You're able to build rapport with them. And then you just feel that you have a much bigger impact on them when you have when it's a smaller group. So yeah, my answer would be tutoring or small group support for them. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So my final question for you is simply, so obviously you've had quite a career, transitioning between different careers. I'm just wondering whether you have any advice for yourself. So you can choose between giving advice to your fresh graduate self, as in when you first finish uni, about to embark on your first job, or fresh grad, as in when you're about to start your teaching career.
Mm. I think, um, mm, I think it's just to be okay to mess up.
Mm,
Um, yeah, to make mistakes. I think that's just part of like the learning process.
mm,
Um, and maybe at times, just I think as I shared with like my scary story, it it's not, the end of the world really if you mess up, or have done something like you felt like it's not quite right. Sometimes it requires kind of like going back to kind of like go forward.
That is very profound. Yes, absolutely. And that totally resonates like with my own journey as well. So I just wanted to thank you, Teresa, for coming onto the podcast. I just really want to say that it's great having you as a friend, but you've also broken the stereotype that I've had of tutor the tutorial school. So I shouldn't really say this on air, but I will. I often like just say to my students, like, honestly, you're just going to tutorial schools just to do exam papers. Like, what's the point? Like, you can do exam papers at school. And sometimes I get frustrated as a school teacher when I'm like, I tell you exactly the same thing. You're just paying someone money to be told the same thing. And but they seem like, in particularly in Hong Kong, they seem to buy it more, like maybe because they have paid the money. But I must say you have broken the stereotype, because I've seen a teacher who truly cares about her students and someone who is looking to always improve the way they teach. And so through all the different conversations we've had, you've also shown me that you are always trying to, like, oh, let's change this, the way we teach this, or even amend the curriculum, or to become a better teacher. So like I said, I've gained a lot more respect for tutors each time you share about your story. So thank you for coming to share your story today.
Thank you for having me, Alan. Thank you.
After the recording, Teresa told me that the feelings between tutorial school teachers and day school teachers were mutual. In other words, tutorial school teachers sometimes also think, what have they learned at school? Shouldn't they have learned this already? What are they doing every single day? And so I guess my biggest takeaway from the conversation is that there needs to be more conversations between day school teachers and tutorial school teachers. Perhaps there's more potential there for us to explore in terms of how to support students better, because at the end of the day, we have the same goal of helping the students learn better. I hope you enjoyed listening to Teresa's extraordinary story, and please do join us again next time on Ordinary Teachers and Students.